come to that in a moment. There are 705 new cases, all locally acquired. That brings us to a total of 8,538 active cases across the state. Sadly, one person has passed away, a man in his 70s from Darebin, and we extend our deepest sympathies and condolences to his family and friends. This will be obviously a very challenging time for them. 81% of yesterday's cases were under the age of 50. Again, we see this day in, day out. This has in every way become a pandemic of the unvaccinated, as we've seen, because of priority, many more people who are older getting access first. Those who are unvaccinated are in the main in the younger age groups. There are some in the older, but there's I think a much larger group of people who are younger because they've only become eligible more recently. It just shows every reason to get vaccinated, every reason to book an appointment and to go and play your part. Not just for the community. You don't need to be motivated by that. I hope you are, but you don't need to be. Just to keep yourself safe. We've got very few people who have had 2 doses of any of the 3 vaccines that find themselves gravely ill, really seriously ill in hospital. That should be a clear message to every single Victorian to book an appointment and go and protect yourself and, of course, your family and everyone else across the community. To give you another further example of that, there are 23% of yesterday's cases are in their 20s. 363 people are currently in hospital. That's an increase of 38 since yesterday. 75 of those are in ICU and 56 of those are on a ventilator. We send our best wishes to each of them and to their families. And of course, we take this opportunity to again thank our dedicated teams of highly skilled, highly trained, highly committed nurses and doctors, ambulance paramedics, the whole hospital team working very hard to provide the best care to those 363 people and many more beyond. In terms of tests and vaccines, there were 51,252 test results received overnight. That's a good strong number for a Sunday, particularly a Sunday at the end of a long weekend. There are 29,657 vaccines administered yesterday in state hubs, plus of course there will have been significant activity in primary care GPs, community pharmacies, and that's part of the reason why we've brought Mukesh in today to have a bit of a chat about that work and to make some announcements. That yesterday's performance, so just under 30,000 in state hubs, takes us to a total of more than 267,000 doses delivered in state hubs in the last week. That's a strong effort. And given some of the supply uncertainty throughout the week, which pleasingly has, I think is in a better place now than it was this time last week, we're pleased to have had that many people come through to receive a dose. 78.3% of the 16 and over, so the Victorian population 16 and above, 78.3% have had a first dose, 47.7% have received both a first and a second dose. So we're very close to that 50% mark, very close to that 80% mark as well, which are very important in terms of driving down transmission, protecting more and more people, and getting us closer to our targets of 70% double dose and 80% double dose in Victoria's roadmap to deliver the national plan. As I always do, I'll just remind people that there are 4,000 first dose Pfizer appointments available this week and 7,400 first dose AstraZeneca appointments available this week in state clinics. There will of course be Moderna available in community pharmacies. There will be Pfizer and AstraZeneca available in GP surgeries. So there is significant vaccine out there across all 3 of these vaccines. All 3 are safe, all 3 work. Consult your health professional around those issues about which one is best for you. But the message that's most important today and every day, particularly as we're getting so close to our 70% double and 80% double targets, those key thresholds when we get to end the lockdown and open up, the best vaccine is the one that you can access today. Not to be shopping around for what you might have perhaps convinced yourself or perhaps been told by someone is a better vaccine. The best vaccine, given that they're all highly effective, is the one that you can access today. So please go online and book one of those appointments. Literally thousands of appointments available over the next 7 days for AstraZeneca and for Pfizer in state hubs. Many tens of thousands of appointments available for Moderna and AstraZeneca in community pharmacy. And again, many tens of thousands of appointments available in GP surgeries and in GP clinics across the state for both Pfizer and the AstraZeneca vaccine. All safe, all highly effective to keep you out of hospital, to prevent you from becoming seriously, seriously ill and potentially in intensive care. Now, what we know is that vaccination performance is not uniform. We don't have the same vaccination rates in every local government area across the state. Today we're talking about metropolitan Melbourne. There'll be some further announcements about regional Victoria. But today I'm announcing that in 11 priority local government areas where either we've got, or sometimes it's a combination of high cases and low vaccination, or just vaccination rates that are a little bit lower than we would like them to be, there are some extra things we can do. And you've seen over the journey, we've opened up extra state hubs, we've put extra pop-ups into those places. Today we're announcing something that I think is unique. I don't think any other state or territory is doing this. A partnership with community pharmacy and a partnership with general practice. So there will be 110 grants of $4,000 and a further 10 grants of $10,000 to GPs and to community pharmacies across those 11 local government areas, and I'll read those local government areas out in just a moment. These grants, there'll be an expression of interest process over the next week, and we'll have certainty. We'll allocate those grants on Monday next week. So what it means is, for instance, that a GP surgery can operate additional hours because they can employ some additional staff. I've had a couple of pharmacists put it to me that they haven't got enough room in their shop, but if they had a bit of help, then they could rent some space next door or just down the road, and they'd be able to run, if you like, their own Vax Hub in that space. So this is all about additional staff, additional wages, additional space, just common sense. If we can help our GPs, who are doing an amazing job, and help our community pharmacists who've been doing amazing work and are now moving into a really intense phase with these hundreds of thousands of Moderna doses arriving, then we'll get more jabs into more arms. We'll do that more quickly. We'll get to our 70% double dose and our 80% double dose faster than we otherwise would. This is just simple, common sense. And again, I think these will be snapped up really fast. If there's more that we can do beyond it, and of course there will be a regional Victorian the equivalent of this quite soon, but these are the metropolitan Melbourne ones first, and they are in the following local government areas: Moreland, Brimbank, Cardinia, Casey, Darebin, Greater Dandenong, Hobsons Bay, Hume, Melton, Whittlesea and Wyndham. So that'll mean that GPs and community pharmacies can use the full allocation of vaccines that are given to them. They can run extra hours. They can see more patients. They can have more people go through the vaccination program that they're running because we're funding those common sense things that have been barriers. And this is all timed to coincide with that big jump in supply, whether it be Moderna in community pharmacy or additional allocations in our GP clinics as well. So they're two separate parts of the same program, but where we can have some crossover and where we can get the same outcome, which is more people jabbed faster, that's obviously a fantastic outcome. I don't have any other announcements to make today. It may be perhaps best if I pass now to Dr. Mukesh Haikwal, well known to everybody, someone who's been doing, he and his staff out in Altona North, been doing an amazing job vaccinating so many people, really going above and beyond, and he can talk about what he's been doing and also talk about what a grant like this would mean for the sort of care and services that he's running at his practice. Over to you, Mukesh.
Thank you, Premier, and thank you for the invitation to speak, colleagues. As is customary, I'd like to acknowledge the land in which I'm standing, the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. This has been a long journey, the vaccination journey, but COVID's been with us even longer. This time last year we had nothing to offer. This time last year we were just dreading what the next announcement was going to be, and we could really do very little about it apart from hope it'll just go away. This year is a remarkable year because we actually have a proven vaccines available in Australia, and a significant proportion of our compatriots have already started to have doses. In fact, many have got their second doses in. We've been working with the state government and our colleagues to plan what to do about vaccines, and nobody needs to be told it's been a bit of a rocky road to get to this stage. And I don't want to dwell on that, because the supply issue is being resolved. The access issue is being resolved. We've seen fabulous inputs from the state, bringing in state hubs to allow people to get access to vaccines, and that's really turbocharged the whole process. We've got so many people able to get vaccines all around the state, and that's brilliant. I will point out, however, that the vast majority of vaccines in this state and across the country have been done by general practice. And I thank the Premier for recognising that and understanding that general practice is a very key part of our health infrastructure in this country and in this state, and that we are local people working with our local patients, providing local services in local facilities, and we are local small businesses. What's happened is the state government has understood this and supported us in Altona North to actually show, by bringing together expertise, giving a little bit of extra support to providing an extra facility, and working with local government, we've been able to increase the level of vaccinations in our area dramatically from the 4th of September by about 4,000 jabs, only doing a short number of sessions in those weeks. The capacity and the knowledge and the expertise of local doctors and local pharmacists working with the local people who are known and highly regarded in their communities means people know where they can go to get good information, good advice, but also to get the vaccine. So certainly talking with my colleagues at AMA Victoria, my local College of General Practitioners and the local General Practice Alliance, we're very grateful to the state government for seeing this opportunity, for providing some additional support and funding to make it actually easier and more straightforward to do these vaccines, because with the current settings, we can't actually do the work when we have the availability. It's so important to get general practice services in normal business hours. So the time to get vaccines tends to be after hours, outside business as usual, and at weekends. And as we all know in our society, that means there's a cost implication. And by the state government recognising this and supporting us as small businesses, we can actually thrive as small businesses, reach out to our local communities, provide them with the care that they need, and more particularly at this moment in time, to hit those targets and get more people vaccinated. The reason they're not getting vaccinated is supply. That's being dealt with because of lack of understanding, because it's been a higgledy-piggledy message. It's not been clear. The message is clear: get vaccinated. And if you want some more advice, who better than your local health provider that you go to every day, that you know and trust, to give you that advice and to go on and give you your vaccinations. So I congratulate the state government and the Premier and the Minister for this initiative. Certainly the AMA Victoria has been talking about these sort of initiatives from the beginning, together with the RSCGP and the Alliance. And certainly the Deputy Cho was involved in this when he was doing vaccinations, Ben Cowie. And so we've put a lot of roadmaps. We know people don't have floor space. They can't socially distance. They can't keep people safe in the normal facilities. So what better way of doing it than to actually support those that can and make this happen. So I'd like to stop there and thank you very much.
Thanks, Premier, and thanks, Mukesh. Great to hear that the ongoing contribution made by general practice in Victoria, which is have been absolutely fundamental, not just to the vaccination program, but to our entire COVID-19 response. So, as the Premier highlighted, the current outbreak is vested very significantly in younger people, and the Premier also referred to the vaccination uptake of over 78% of those aged 16 and over having had their first dose, and 48% on their second dose. We're also seeing a rapid uptake of vaccination amongst the newly eligible 12 to 15-year-olds, with a third, so 33% of children in that age group now having had their first dose of COVID-19 vaccine here in Victoria, including my two kids who were vaccinated last week with their first dose. So this is a really important demographic and will go a long way to assisting us to the safe reopening of our schools as heralded in the roadmap. It's important to note these younger Victorians aren't captured in our overall vaccination targets. but a really important demographic nonetheless, and fantastic to see those numbers going up so quickly. The Premier's already highlighted the thousands of available first dose Pfizer and AstraZeneca appointments that are in the system right now. Some further detail on that. So for Pfizer, we have more than 400 appointments in the Melton Woodgrove Vaccination Centre, more than 400 at Eagle Stadium in Wyndham, more than 150 at the Melbourne Showgrounds, and more than 200 at CoHealth in West Melbourne. In terms of AstraZeneca appointments, there are more than 500 available at the Cranbourne Turf Club, over 400 at the Sandown Racecourse, and more than 900 at the Melbourne Convention and Exhibition Centre. So just some of the thousands of vaccine appointments that the Premier referred to that are available right now. But as we've been saying, and as was reflected on by Mukesh just then, the vast majority of vaccine doses becoming available right now, and certainly in the coming weeks, will be available through general practice and community pharmacies. There's every likelihood that the local clinic or the local pharmacy near you is the closest and easiest way, not just to get your dose of vaccine, but again, as Mukesh was highlighting, to get that advice, to get that personal care that only your local healthcare provider can give. And with today's announcement, there will be even more ways that Victorians will be able to access vaccination at these sites. So, even if you've had your first dose at a state clinic, really please do consider having your second dose of the same vaccine with your local GP or pharmacist, which is exactly what I did. Also, just in reference to the school pop-up vaccination sites, we have another school pop-up opening in Fawkner today. We're combining the pop-up for John Fawkner Secondary College and Darul Uloom College of Victoria. The pop-up will be at the CB Smith Reserve in Fawkner and will run from today until Wednesday. It'll be open to everybody in the community, regardless of whether they're connected with the schools or not. The Moreland local government area is experiencing a significant outbreak at the moment, with 118 active cases in Fawkner right now. So this pop-up, alongside the sort of initiatives that we've been hearing about in general practice and pharmacies, are a timely addition to the vaccination efforts in the area. And with that, I'll hand over to Jerome. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. Good morning. As the Premier said, 705 new cases of COVID in the last 24 hours in Victoria, giving us a total of 8,538 active cases of COVID that we're working through now. The distribution of those cases, again, is very familiar for those who've been watching over the last few weeks. Almost 60% of all of our cases are in the northern suburbs, so 412 cases in the northern suburbs. In fact, 30% of all of our cases today are in fact in the borough of Hume, 210 cases in Hume. The reductions we've seen in our case numbers over the last couple of days, and of course far too early to pull any trend out of that, but all coming in Hume, so that at least is a welcome bit of relief. Key suburbs for us of concern are Craigieburn, Roxburgh Park, Meadow Heights and Epping, where we continue to see significant numbers of cases every day. In the western suburbs, we have just under a quarter of our cases for today, 165 cases across Point Cook, Tarneet and Truganina. In our southeastern suburbs, we have 84 cases today, in particular across Pakenham, Dandenong and Hampton Park. And in the eastern suburbs, there are 32 cases today across Boronia and Camberwell in particular. We've got 12 cases today in regional Victoria, again a reduction on where we've been over the last few days. 4 of those are in the Macedon Ranges, and they're all household contacts, primary household contacts, and as such no new activity in there. There are 2 cases in Mitchellshire, one of which is a new, one is a household primary close contact, one is a new case, an electrician in Wallen who we believe has worked in the metro area. We have 2 cases in Geelong, again all known primary close contacts. We have a new workplace case in Bawburghshire, which is actually somebody who works in the metro area but who resides in Bawburghshire. And we have one case in Ballarat. It's a partner of a previously known positive case. I'm pleased to confirm no positive cases in Shepparton today. In terms of the wider outbreaks, obviously we still have around 28,000 primary close contacts, and we continue to urge those who are primary close contacts to maintain those really strong isolation protocols. And I'm pleased to confirm that over 1,000 people were released from their isolation yesterday. And my thanks to everybody who's been doing those strict isolation protocols over the last few weeks. We have around 15,500 secondary close contacts that are also going through that isolation work, and around 5,300 red zone returnees, all going through various forms of isolation at this point in time. Probably two sites of interest, again, two examples of the kind of outbreaks we're seeing at this point in time. We've got a manufacturing site in the northern suburbs where we have 19 confirmed cases just in one workforce. One case found initially, all staff were isolated as we normally would and tested, and 18 further cases found within 2 days. It highlights two things, one of which is for all work sites. If you've got essential workers coming together, there is a high likelihood or high risk that any one of them may be positive, and the speed of transmission within the workplace. When you go from one case to 19 in the space of 2 days, that's a pretty aggressive attack rate within a workplace setting, and a workplace that should otherwise have good COVID-safe protocols. My second example for today is a freight company in Campbellfield. Again, 11 staff members now, all positive at that particular site. Most of that transmission believed to have occurred through carpooling on the way to work. So actually the work site had good protocols in place, good COVID-safe practices in place, but significant car sharing amongst staff members over the course of a few days. And again, it is the entire experience of work, including how people get to work, that of course is part of the risk profile. Testing numbers have been strong over the long weekend, continue to be strong at this point in time, seeing a very good testing levels in Hume in particular. They're running at 2 to 3 times the average testing rate for Metro Melbourne as a whole. And my thanks to everybody who's coming out to get tested, whether it be in metro areas or in regional areas. We've also got we continue to run our rapid response testing teams, particularly across regional Victoria. And I thought I'd just do a shout out to those teams. They not only work phenomenally hard as all of our testing teams do, but they essentially are a mobile operation that sets up and relocates every few days to new areas where we need some additional testing surge. Right now we've got mobile testing teams operating in Wangaratta, in Traralgon, in Warrnambool, in Shepparton, Ballarat, Kyneton, Geelong, and Bendigo. So it's a pretty active program. It goes all across our state, and my thanks to them for the hard work they're doing, supported always by local councils and local health services to provide that real strong support to local communities. And then finally, just to add in some further commentary to the vaccination numbers that Ben was providing, we've continued to see really strong surge in vaccination uptake across our most important LGAs, where we've seen low levels of vaccination previously. In Wyndham, we now have 81% of the population of 16 and over having had their first dose. That's an increase of 14% in the last 2 weeks. In Hobsons Bay, 77% of the population have now had their first dose. It's an increase of 8% in the last 2 weeks. In Hume, the real central point of our most active cases, we're now at 73% first doses. That's an increase of 16% in the last 2 weeks. So 2 weeks ago, Hume was on 56%, it's now 57%, it's now 73%, and more work happening there. Casey is at 76%, Greater Dandenong at 70%, 71% first dose, and both have increased by 13% over the last couple of weeks. To drive those kind of results, not only have we seen phenomenal work by the GPs and pharmacists in those areas, and my thanks to them for all the hard work they're doing to make more appointments available and to get more people out there. We've also run 10 pop-up sites across those priority areas of, particularly the north and west, 10 pop-up sites in those northern and western LGAs that have been part of driving those numbers up. And we have 4 of those still running, including the one that Ben just mentioned in Fawkner. So a lot of work going on, and our thanks to our local partners in those areas for making all that work possible. With that, I'll hand back to the Premier for questions.
Thanks very much, Jerome. We're happy to take any questions you have.
Have you had any clarity on the 4th week of October in terms of doses for Pfizer and whether you can bring forward the interval?
No, not at this stage, Simon. As soon as we have that And let's be clear, as Jerome indicated yesterday, we've had an indication, but we haven't had it confirmed, so it's not quite in the same status as the first 3 weeks. Hopefully it has the same status quite soon, and it's confirmed, and then that gives us an option to change that interval. Again, I just want to stress for everybody out there, you can't bring forward second doses if you don't have those second doses either in the fridge or absolute clarity that they're coming. It's got better over the last week. Let's hope we get the 4th week of October confirmed the same as the first 3, and then that'll give us an option. But it's not the politicians who make the decisions about dose intervals. There's an expert group. If they'll then have an option, and then, I think it'd be likely if we can get that certainty of vaccine supply that we might well be able to bring that dose forward, and that'll help us get to 70% double dose faster, and in turn 80% double dose faster as well.
Will it be a priority age group thing for the reduction in dose intervals? Will you target perhaps under 40s who are clearly on these statistics the driver of case numbers at the moment?
Yeah, I'm not quite certain about whether we'd go down to that level or whether we might. Obviously, Pfizer's not available for everybody. It's only available for a certain group across the Victorian community. Obviously, the only vaccine that 12 to 18s can have is Pfizer. Pfizer's only going up to 60s. So we've already limited it, if you like, so it's not there like it's there for everybody. But I think that the experts would look at that, and they might well provide us with some advice to get very, very targeted in terms of bringing that dose forward. At the same time, though, we don't want the system to be so confusing that it is a barrier to people getting their second dose.
Just on freedoms for those that are vaccinated, have you, as the Department of Health or the government, looked at maybe cutting the time that they need to spend in isolation if they've been to a Tier 1 or Tier 2 exposure site?
Yeah, look, I saw some coverage about this today. There will be, go back to first principles. At our urging, National Cabinet is, and through AHPPC, is looking at what's called a new common operating picture. So that's the sort of the 5 or 6 or 10 things that we're all measured against. Those tables that you would have seen that do either green, amber or red when it comes to TTIQ, so test, trace, isolate and quarantine. As we move into not an aggressive suppression chasing zero world, as we're opening up and we know there's going to be cases, because we get to 70% double dose down 80% double dose, then a new common operating picture, a new kind of table of best efforts needs to be out there, and AHPPC are working on that right now. But that's a long way of saying yes, there will be different ways in which we handle both sites of transmission versus sites of exposure, and then there might be a risk rating put across that. We're already doing a little bit of that now. New South Wales are a bit further advanced because have had over time greater numbers, but how it looks once we get open and how it looks once we get to 80%, it'll be different, but that's not settled yet. It's not finalised. As soon as it is, then we'll make sure people have got absolute clarity about what we'll ask of them and what they'll have to do.
But it'll only come in, though, when we get to 80%, is that what you're saying?
Well, there might be some of it come in before then, but it might well be that there's a different common operating picture or a different kind of expected outcome for New South Wales and Victoria, for instance, because we're in a very different place to WA and Queensland and others. It is best to let AHPPC do their work, and as soon as that's settled, National Cabinet will have to agree to that, and then we'll be up here making announcements, or probably the PM will make announcements about what that new kind of traffic light system, what does success look like? That's what that document's there for.
Are you expecting that to be on the agenda at the next National Cabinet?
I'm not certain, but we have had a break. We're back to 2-week meetings now, so I assume the next meeting will be this Friday, I think. So we'll certainly get an update. But Simon, as soon as it's agreed about ISO periods and all of those things, and what's a reasonable expectation of any contact tracing team in any state, but particularly in states where there's a large caseload and where you're open, as soon as that's finalised, then we'll be sure to announce that.
Just on the speed at which we get to 70 and 80,
Yes.
with the increased mRNA to primary care, the new certainty on the end of October, does that mean we might get to those targets quicker than what was predicted in the modelling last Sunday? And just further to that, was that modelling, the projections in that modelling, were they predicated just on the 7-day averages of the previous week or on future expected supply?
They would have had both what we'd done over the 7 days before, say. I'm not certain about the interval, but say 7, 14, whatever it was. It would have looked at what we'd been achieving, And to the extent that we had certainty of supply, we would have given that to the modelers and they would have plugged that in as well. The other thing too is that there's a whole lot of different websites, a whole lot of different people that are tracking how every state's going, and we look to a multitude of sources. And some of them they're not paid for by the government. That's media and others who are doing a good job trying to predict things. But look, as we've seen, our 70% first dose, we were a few days early. Our 80% first dose, we're a few days behind when we thought we would be. Again, this vaccine is compulsory for a small but very important number of people. It's not compulsory for everyone. So it's always, essentially, how many people came forward and got vaccinated yesterday? How many people came forward and got vaccinated the day before? How many people make an appointment today and play their part in getting us to 70 and 80 faster? So it really is in the hands of every single Victorian who hasn't booked an appointment yet. And that's why every day we stand up here and appeal to people for your own safety, for the safety of the people that you love, and for your freedom, for all of our freedom. Please go and get vaccinated. And as you say, there is more supply there than there's ever been now, whether it be Moderna and AstraZeneca in community pharmacy, AstraZeneca and Pfizer at our amazing GP, primary care practices and surgeries right across the state, and of course AstraZeneca and Pfizer in our state hubs.
I guess the question is, are your people in the department telling you that now with this flood of supply to primary care this month, are we going to have a similar month to New South Wales in
I hope
August?
so, but no one's told me to stand up here and announce a new set of dates. So if there is advice to announce a new set of dates, I'll do so. But again, we'll get there faster, and what a terrific problem to have, to be 2 or 3 days ahead. That'd be great. But it's really, for those who've already been vaccinated and for those who are working really hard to try and, like the grants we've announced today, I don't think any other state's doing this. They may be. I'm not aware of any other state or territory doing this. We're really taking this to a new level. That yes, there's lots of supply in primary care now, but there are some other barriers. And as Dr. Hockwell says, GPs are running small businesses. They don't have unlimited resources. They've got a day job to do as well. So there's all their patients have got all the other things they need to come and see them about. We can't just assume that they're like a state hub and only do first and second doses. So this important grant to help with wages, to help with running additional hours, things like that, I think it's a real common sense step forward. And look, if we have to add to this, if we have to do more, then of course we stand ready to do it, because for a relatively modest investment, you get a huge return. You get more and more people vaccinated. That's less people in hospital. That's our community and economy open sooner.
New South Wales has a Freedom Day in store from October 11. Will their vaccination rate affect their ability to travel here? So once they reach 80% double dose, will that affect, or are we waiting for ours to get high before you go?
I think it's probably more likely ours, given that regardless of whether they're at 50 or 80 or 100 even, you can't come back unless you've been double dosed. But we'll look at that every single day, Bridget, and if there's a need because of the relative risks, if there's a need to recalibrate that and change it, probably to Simon's point, whether it's the full 14 days at that time, all of those things get looked at. All those things get looked at every single day. But the good news is Jerome's reporting, briefing me that there's been a pretty steady flow of people returning, whether it be by road, through the airport. That's great. None of us have enjoyed for one moment having Victorians locked out of Victoria and having Melburnians locked into their homes. We want this to end, and the way that happens is by getting people their first dose and their second dose and encouraging in lots of creative ways. But the best innovation is common sense, and us supporting GPs, us supporting pharmacy. Today's a modest amount of money in the scheme of things, but it'll make a huge difference.
Speaking of New South Wales, they've just announced a 90% double dose threshold December 1st, which would be unlimited home visitors as well as unlimited outdoor gatherings. Is that based on any modelling that you've seen? Does the Doherty report or has any discussion in National Cabinet?
No, I'm trying to resist an argument for its own sake. You should speak to the New South Wales government about what modelling they've done and what modelling they've released.
I'm just more curious as to whether
I can't recall whether Doherty's got a 90% threshold. The national plan doesn't. I don't think. I think the the placemat that the Prime Minister's put out doesn't necessarily have a 90% kicker in it. I'm happy to go and check for you, but as for modelling that's been done by the New South Wales government, you'd probably have to speak to them.
That's okay. I'm just asking, would we be considering, or are we considering anything else, that another threshold for us at 90% or beyond?
Not specifically, not in that way, not where you would peg Yeah, no, I don't think we're at that. We're not at that place yet. I think we're far more focused on getting 70% double dose and 80% double dose, get through those gateways, and then look, would be again terrific problem to have to be at 90%. That's would be one of the highest vax rates anywhere in the world. And what that'll mean, and why would you stop at 90? Like you would keep going as much as we can, and then we start the whole process again trying to do booster shots. Because what that means is that if every person is vaccinated, that person is at a dramatically reduced likelihood, not a certainty, but a dramatically reduced likelihood of finishing up in hospital with this. So there's every good reason to keep on going, and that's why we will.
But there's still significant restrictions here in Victoria as per the roadmap at 80%. So could
Yeah.
we see another threshold installed later on that would perhaps incentivise that last?
Yeah, well, no, hang on,
20%
no, I'm not here today to commit to a 85 or 90 or 92 and a half or whatever. We'll come back to that at the appropriate time. What I would say though, Mark, we're not leaving these restrictions on forever. Like we've gone out with as much detail as we can. On or about that date, we've nominated for the 80% double dose. We then thought it was appropriate to give people a sense of what Christmas would look like. There is an intervening period, and I want that to be as free but as safe as possible. And the time for us to be, I'm not surprised that Gladys is talking about 90%. They're 3 or 4 weeks. They're 3 or 4 weeks ahead of us, and maybe in 3 or 4 weeks' time, I'll be able to talk about what comes after 80% too. But they are a number of weeks ahead of us, and that's not a criticism. They got more vaccine. They had a bigger problem at the time. What I would say to you is that we should just not lose sight of the fact that over these next few weeks, we're going to be able to watch very closely and see what happens in New South Wales as they open up. What does it mean for their health system? What does it mean for their nurses, for their doctors? What does it mean for case numbers? All of those things. And we wish them well, but we will get the benefit of that. Much like I'm sure they got the benefit of watching on and observing our second wave last year.
So the decrease in cases in New South Wales at the moment doesn't help us doesn't help inform our roadmap at all because we're waiting to see what happens when they open up.
Well, yes, but there's a further point to make, and probably one that comes before that point, and that is that they're at a higher vaccination rate. So, what I'm advised in many different discussions is that the 50% double dose was a significant thing for them, and you started to see some stability come to their numbers. They jump around a lot. We're not at 50% yet. We're getting quite close to that. To the extent that it was meaningful there, then let's hope it's meaningful here too. But obviously logic just tells you as you go 50, 55, 60, all the way, that steady march towards 70 and 80, the more people that are vaccinated, that's less people spreading it, that's less people becoming unwell, less people finishing up in hospital. So that's why comparisons with them is a little bit challenging. But we can expect to be in similar positions to them. The key point though is that once they open, then we get the benefit of being able to watch and see what that means for hospital admissions and all of those things.
Just back on your,
Not necessarily looking to change the roadmap. It'll just, as I said at the time, modelling is only, there is a degree of chance and there's a degree of, it's as strong as the inputs. The actuals always beat whatever modelling you've done. So we will get to watch and see what happens, and that'll be important for us.
My question's on that exactly. The actuals since the roadmap was released here have been steady growth, but definitely not exponential growth.
Yeah, I think you'd say on the more positive side of that Burnett curve or Burnett range.
Are they in kind of regular conversations with, obviously with the department, but is the cabinet getting reports on how we are tracking in terms of the trajectory they modelled as a scenario?
Yeah, so the Coordinating Ministers Committee gets updates from the Health Minister and beyond that the Chief Health Officer in terms of what's happening in other parts of the country, what's happening with our case numbers, where they are, all of that detail. That's multiple times a week.
How would you describe their reports, the Burnett model?
Well, no, it's not necessarily from Burnett.
The intermediaries.
Yeah. Look, I think it's at the more positive end of their scale. It's not like where, if you said it was sort of, it's not the best, but green, amber, red. It's amber to green rather than in that red zone. But it can change quickly. Like last week, we were all, and I think many people were, their breath was taken away a little bit by that big jump up to 700, 800 cases. So it can jump around a bit, but we're on trend. We always said they'd go up. They are going up, and it's at the more positive end. But I just stress for those watching and listening, even at the most optimistic and positive end of that curve, our nurses are going to face many thousands of patients that they have to treat, and we're going to see many thousands of people very, very unwell. That's why we're not racing to open everything up at 50% double dose. We're waiting for the National Cabinet benchmarks at 70 and 80.
Just on Mark's 90%, can I just get one in? The New South Wales plan today, I'm not sure if you've been briefed on it, it allows...
No, it appears it's been announced during this press conference, but I'll probably get a briefing at some
15
point.
minutes before, so yeah. At 90% double dose, Gladys Berejiklian is saying there'll be the same freedoms for vaccinated and unvaccinated people. So the incentive to get vaccinated at the 80% is that you'll have 5 or 6 weeks where you have diminished freedoms. Do you expect that sometime between 80% and Christmas, our rules will be the same for everyone?
I'm not foreshadowing that at all, no. There's every reason to get vaccinated now, and I wouldn't want to give anybody a reason to wait 5 or 6 weeks, because I don't think that that's a certainty. 10% of the community is still a very large number of people. So even at 90%, that's still 10% of 16 and older. None of our little kids, so the overall percentage of the community that don't have the protection of 1 or 2 doses, even at 90%, is a significant number. So again, no one's chasing 100%, because I don't think that's something that you would realistically achieve. But we're going to be pushing for as long as we possibly can, as every single jab matters, every dose of this matters, because you're at such a small risk relative to someone who's not vaccinated of ultimately finishing up really, really sick, that it's worth pushing, and we're going to continue to push. So I'm not going to be saying to people, "I'll just wait 5 weeks and you'll be able to have all the freedoms." No, that's not a guarantee at all here. We've not made that decision. In fact, we've not even turned our mind really to when some of the vaccinated economy and, if you like, lockouts rather than lockdowns. We haven't even had a conversation about when that might change and when everyone might be on an equal footing. So disparate, so stark are the differences between the risks to the hospital system and to ill health that a vaccinated person poses versus an unvaccinated person.
It seems, Premier, we might be on the verge of losing the Boxing Day test if the Cricket Australia request from the WACA goes ahead. They've asked to shuffle the fixtures around because big teams would have come here first. Yeah. They're not going to get into the other states that are currently COVID zero. What are your thoughts on that?
I think the term currently COVID zero is probably the really important one, isn't it? Like, it's going to get into every state and territory in this country. Let's be in no doubt about that. So, you know, I'm not here to commentate on other states. We've got enough to get on with here, but it's just a point of fact. Unless people are going to be cut off from everywhere forever, then it's going to spread. And I think there's an acknowledgement among COVID zero state leaders and territory leaders that this thing's so wildly infectious, and that the perennial suppression, the endless suppression of this thing, the endless delivery of zero cases, that can't go on it just can't go on. It can't go on forever. You have to open up at some point. As for what Cricket Australia's intentions are, I'm not briefed on the most recent developments. I'd leave it to Martin Bakula as the Minister for Sport and Major Events to talk about that.
It's going to be pretty hard, though, to see state borders opening up between now and summer when that cricket schedule goes ahead. So
well, let's wait and see. This is pretty fast moving. I hope that our borders open by then. I'm sure that Gladys hopes her borders open by then. We would hope. I think that to an extent our international borders will be open by then. So we want as much freedom of movement as possible. We want people to be able to go about their business. I don't want people locked out of their state, and I don't want people locked into their homes. But we will have people locked out of venues and events like the Boxing Day test if they haven't had 2 jabs. So that's, again, another reason. Go and see Mukesh at his clinic or another GP. Go and visit your community pharmacist. Come to a state hub. Get vaccinated. For you, for the people you love, for all of us. First dose, second dose, and then freedom. That's what we're talking about. For a big event and for the smallest of events in your own home. We have so many more options, and they're so much safer when we get to 70, 80, and indeed even up to 90% double dose.
How many extra doses are you hoping can be administered each week by pharmacies and GPs thanks to these grants?
I don't think we've necessarily put a kind of a hard and fast number on it. I think it'll vary. There'll be some pharmacies where they might have been able to do 100 appointments a day, with this grant, some extra hours, maybe some extra space that they can access, maybe they can do 150 or 200 doses per day. I think when Anthony Tassoni, the president of the Guild, was here the other day, his pharmacy's out in Cranbourne, and they're doing about 200 per day. That's about as much as they can do. Others will probably be less, and these grants will get them up to a higher amount. The thing to remember is, they're doing an amazing job, primary care, but it's not a state vax hub. They've got a business to run as well. They've got customers that don't come there for a first or a second dose. They've got lots of other things to do, particularly when it comes to primary care, where GPs have got many patients, and I think probably more patients than they've ever had, given that all those that whole phenomenon about health catch up from last year and all of those things. So we haven't put a number on it, but I think it'll mean more, and it'll mean that we'll get them through faster. Perhaps the thing to do is, if I come back to you in a week or so's time, we might be able to report the actuals, and you can make some comparisons off that.
Are you frustrated that this money for GPs and pharmacies has had to come from the state when it is a Commonwealth?
No, Mark will just get on and get it done. And if we have to do more, we will. And if there's more to be done after that, we'll do that too, because nothing's more important than getting through these gateways.
And in terms of actuals rather than roadmap figures, are you still working on the assumption that 10% of all people who are infected with COVID will end up in hospital, or is that number coming down as more and more people are getting vaccinated? Because obviously it's 300 and something odd compared to 8,500 active cases, and I know there's a lag, but are we expecting essentially 800 people in hospital in a couple of days or weeks' time?
I've got no advice to say that 10% number isn't holding up, and that about 1% of that 10% finish up in intensive care, which is roughly, that jumps around a bit. But for every 10 COVID cases, the basic maths is, and the rule of thumb, and it may change again, volume becomes something that impacts this. One of those 10 people will finish up in hospital. We don't want that to happen, but that seems to be the trend. That's with us closed. Once you open up, though, particularly if you were to open up now, there's a lot of discussion about beds. Like if you open now, you couldn't have enough beds. No matter how many you had, you would not have enough beds, because we're only at 47, 48%. Once you get to 80, though, I've used that term a fair bit. It's a much fairer fight. It's not easy, but we've got a decent chance of being able to manage that. But it's going to be a tough and difficult time for our nurses and for the whole team. It really is.
When we get 80% vaccinated, you still believe that 10% of those people who get infected will be in?
That's 10% of unvaccinated people. I think sorry, go back to first principles. The vast majority of people that are getting it have not been vaccinated. The vast majority of people finishing up in hospital have not had one dose, or let alone two. So that trend's going to continue. Now, it's the relativities of how many people are in the unvaccinated, given that it's a pandemic of the unvaccinated. That number's shrinking. But as you open up, though, you've got much more movement. So it's trying to balance those two things out. It's just a long way of saying, if you don't want to finish up in hospital, the best and most meaningful thing you can do today is book an appointment to get vaccinated. I can't guarantee it. It's not nothing's 100%, but it's into the 90s. Your protection against really, really serious illness. And we see that borne out in all the numbers. Tiny fraction of the people in hospital today have had 2 doses, and some of those can be explained by some aged care residents that we've moved for their own safety and the safety of their fellow residents out of aged care and into hospital. But the vast majority of people who are vaccinated are not finishing up in hospital. And when I say vast, we're talking about into the 90s.
Just about a week since the construction ban came into effect, how is it going getting construction workers vaccinated?
Discussions are going well.
And I was going to ask also, have you put any thought to opening any sites earlier if they've reached the vaccination targets?
No, it's very important that all of those in construction know and understand that these rules are very serious, and there's no kind of default. It just opens next week. Like, there are things that are going to have to happen, and it's not just about getting open; it's about staying open. And I hope not just to be resetting back to 25%. I hope to be able to lay out a pathway to this sector, playing the really important role that it plays in the Victorian economy beyond 25%. So there's a lot at stake here. It needed to be reset. I'm very grateful to all of those that have been engaging with us deeply, and we will hopefully have more to say later in the week. But it's not something where it's a done deal. Like, we've still got things, we've got to get commitments, and then we've got to see good practice. We've got to see people treating this like they treat asbestos and other issues of workplace safety. Like, you can't be wearing your high-vis and your hard hat and having your mask underneath your chin. That doesn't work. Safety today in a global pandemic on a building site is not just about the stuff you can see, it is about COVID as well. And look, you might be vaccinated, that's terrific, but you can still get it, and you can still potentially give it to someone who isn't, through no fault of their own. You know, the younger people have only become eligible recently. That's why we're giving priority to those workers from that sector to go and get the first dose. But look, we are seeing, I want to thank tradesmen and women. We've seen so many coming through our state hubs. I'm sure that Mukesh and others have seen them coming through primary care as well. So, you know, there's been a minority that have been behaving very badly, a minority of people, I should say, a small number. But the vast majority are going and doing what's most important, going and getting the jab so they can get back to work.
So it could be opened at more than 25%?
Well, we don't want this sector at 25% forever. We want it to get back to 100. So hopefully I'll be able to have more to say about that. As I've said so many times, the roadmap was not a roadmap produced in 7 volumes. There was some key features, and it gave people a good, clear sense. And then we said all along that we would infill some of that detail. So, for instance, there's discussions going on today and all last week with live music, with the creative industries. There's discussions going on with pubs and clubs and restaurants and bars about vaccinated economy trials or pilots, for instance. The Deputy Premier was out last week talking about the schools plan and filling in some details there. We'll have some further things to say about construction and lots of other industries as we get closer every day to that 70% double dose.
The roadmap didn't have heaps to say on the return to work for office workers. It said that even at 80%, it would be recommended to work from home. But for double vax people, you could come into work.
Yep.
Do you envision there might be public health directions on being able to return to city offices if you're not vaccinated, or would that just be a matter for each individual company?
I'm not sure, Paul, actually. That might be something to ask Brett when he's next before you. I don't want to cut across what his expectations are, but again, we want to get people back, but it has to be safe. And there's just going to be that period where we've got a spike in cases, a spike in hospitalisations, a really hard working environment for our nurses who are already fatigued, and the whole health team, I should say. None of us can make, either through policy or through practice, none of us can make that job harder. We should all look to make that, well, not to make it worse, not to contribute to that workload. It's going to be hard enough, let alone if we haven't got vaccinated when we could have. We're breaking the rules when we could be following them, so on and so on. We've all just got to play our part. I know it's hard, it's incredibly hard. But every day we're closer, and we're very close to getting to these important milestones, getting the protection of these 3 global leading vaccines. They work, they're safe. Nothing's more important for freedom, for a sense of normality, for a Christmas with the people that you love, and for a lot of freedom between, in the weeks before and indeed beyond. You've got to go and get vaccinated. There's thousands of appointments. Go and see your GP, go and see your pharmacist, come to a state hub. Do so with confidence.
Premier, can you talk to us about those air purifiers for schools?
Yes.
Is that something we should all be investing in for our homes? They seem to be pretty...
Well, they certainly work, and part of our process has been to monitor airflow. So it's not just filtration, it's also monitoring which rooms don't ventilate as well as you might like them to. A lot of rooms are built some time ago. Not every room's got windows, not every room's got the airflow that you want. Then you target the areas where you need to filtrate the air, and I don't think any state's ordered more of these than we have. It's all about getting our kids back to school and making sure that they're as safe as possible. There will be other environments, office environments, even home environments, yes, where this relatively cheap technology can keep you safe.
I mean, would you consider delaying daylight savings until the curfew's lifted?
No, but I might. But no, I wouldn't do. Maybe the other way around though. We might have to have a think about, with daylight saving coming, we might have to have a think about the hours of the curfew. I'm not announcing that. That's not my decision. It's a decision based on advice from the Chief Health Officer, and I don't have any. But that is a practical matter. And I think if you reflect last year, I think we made a similar change, and the hours that the curfew came in the evening was put out an hour, I think, from memory.
Sorry, just back to your comments about potential changes to isolation periods for
Yes.
people who are vaccinated.
Yep.
If that was to happen, would it follow that vaccinated returning travellers could face different quarantine rules and potentially a shorter time?
Yeah, and again, it's about the relative risks. It's also about the capacity that we have to deal with those relative risks. So it might be, it might be safer there than it is here, but we've got more patients in hospital, so it all kind of has to be programmed in to trying to calculate these things. All I'm saying is this: when you're open, when you've got cases, when you're not chasing zero, then what success looks like from a contact tracing point of view, so from a test, trace, isolate, quarantine point of view, that looks different. Volume is not your friend. Look, it's very hard to provide the same response if you've got 10 cases than if you've got 1,000 cases a day. So that's all being updated, and that's appropriate. And I was very keen to make sure that colleagues agreed to that, and they did. And AHPPC is leading that work. So as soon as that comes back, we'll be in a better position to be able to answer what it is, but also what are the logical kind of flow-ons from that.
If the TGA does approve rapid antigen testing for use at home, would you see that form part of, say, a home quarantine system?
Yep, it could do. And that's, so just be clear about this. There's been a lot of talk and a lot of urgings about rapid antigen testing. As Minister Hunt's confirmed today, if anyone needed it confirmed. Look, I've never been in any doubt. I don't think you have, but there's some others who've been sort of playing games with this stuff. Like, it's not approved. When it gets approved, we'll be able to use it. So it's not approved at this stage. Let's hope that approval comes really, really fast. But I will just say again, all the advice that I have ever received on this, and when you think about it, logic tells you this too. When it's done serially, when it's done each day over a course of days, it is much more useful than if you do a one-off. Now, you can go and check this, but I was doing some other work. I had the TV on in the background the other day, and they were talking about Byron Bay and the lockdown there, and the fact that someone had gone and taken a rapid antigen test, got a false negative, and then tested with a PCR test positive later, a day or so later. So that may or may not be the best example, but I think it might show you that you've just got to be careful with this stuff. So you've got to follow advice. TGA go through a process, and it means that can be really challenging and a bit frustrating while they're doing it, but it means that when they give an approval, I think it carries greater weight. That's why we've got the TGA there to do that important work. But when we get to the point that it's approved to self-administer as opposed to being administered by a health professional, then we will make use of it. Where the advice is, this is a thing to use, it'll work, it'll streamline processes, absolutely we will.
I think New South Wales has
That's some way off though, it seems.
New South Wales has bought a lot of these tests in preparation for that. Are we a bit behind here in Victoria?
No, I wouldn't
not
think
having
so.
them in the warehouse ready to go for that
I
approval?
wouldn't think so. I'm happy to. I don't have a stock take to hand, but I can try and find out for you. Look, it's not a purchasing wars thing. Like, we bought a lot more air filters than it seems some other states have done. They might have a few more rat tests sitting on the shelf. I don't know. We'll have what we need when we need it. That's been the story of this pandemic all the way through. Back to the people talking about beds. You don't open beds until you've got patients to put in them. Just doesn't make any sense. Otherwise, you've got resources being wasted. You don't necessarily need to buy up every single test on the market. Let's wait till they're approved. I'm sure we have adequate supplies. I'm sure we'll get adequate supplies if we don't. But I'm happy to come back to you on that.
Do you have advice on when you'd need to open up a new ward of ICU beds, say not necessarily in a hospital?
We have a number of, as Minister Foley I think has gone to this a number of times, we have a number of hospitals that are streamed hospitals, so they're taking, the COVID patients aren't going across the whole system, they're being streamed into certain hospitals. And we're opening beds as we need to. And it isn't just about ICU, it's about ward beds as well. Not everyone needs an ICU bed, but we've got 300 plus patients. Not all of them are in ICU, but they're all challenging to nurse and to care for. But we've got capacity, and we will continue to open up capacity as we need to. So money's not a barrier. PPE and machines and equipment is not a barrier. The biggest barrier, and it's not a sense of criticism, far from it, but the biggest barrier that all of us need to appreciate is that our nurses and our staff are fatigued. They have had 20 months like they've never had before. And we just have to be realistic about what we can expect from them. We also have to be realistic as well. You don't train up critical care capacity staff in a few months. So it's not unlimited. That's why we all have to make good choices, smart choices, that don't make the job of those nurses and doctors and AMBOs and all the other team harder. None of us should be making that task harder than it already is. I'll put it another way. There's only so many double shifts people can work. And they're double shifts and extended hours in grade 3 PPE, head to toe, pressure sores, exhaustion, dehydration. Like I've taken the time to speak to these staff, and what I know is they're doing the best of work in very difficult circumstances, and our job is not to make that harder, but indeed to support them.
Just to an earlier question on a higher vaccine threshold at another stage of easing.
Yep.
I'm looking at the roadmap. There is a fourth stage. So
The National Cabinet stage, yes.
Yeah, it's in the Victorian indicative roadmap
Yep.
as well. So that's there's 80% double dose for 16 plus, which is November 4 or whatever.
Yes.
And then there's the 80% 12 and
Well, we
over,
pick up the 12-year-olds,
which is
yes,
kind of close
which we
to
thought was just logical.
Yeah, closer to a 90% 16 plus, I imagine.
No, it'll only go... sorry. When you add the 12, 13, 14, 15 and 15-year-olds in, those 12 to 15s, when you add them in, you pick up about 1 percentage point. It's not a lot.
Apologies.
Yeah, but in the time taken, we will have got closer to 90. Yeah. We might be 81, say. Although, what Ben reported before, with a third of those 12 to 15-year-olds already having one dose, they're catching up fast. They may be at 80% by the time the rest of the community is at 80%, if that makes sense.
It makes sense. So the only, I guess, indicative rule change in that category in the Victorian roadmap is that there could be 30 visitors in the home by Christmas. Is it right to say
there will be at 80% by then, and there will be 30 visitors in the home. That's what we're trying to achieve.
But just early, you weren't able to commit to Mark that there would be any further changes when we get to the higher threshold.
Because I haven't made decisions about that.
We haven't made decisions, but would it be right to say that as we get closer, there will be quite wholesale change when we get closer to that 90 that you're just not able to detail now? But because I think Victorians
couple
are
of points.
keen to know that the 80% clamps won't remain in perpetuity.
Yeah, of course they won't. And I don't know how many times I've said it, but I'll say it again. We're not endlessly suppressing this virus. We're opening up. It's a very difficult gateway, but we have got to pass through it and normalise this. And that means there are going to be people who pass away. And there are going to be people who are in hospital gravely ill. That is unavoidable. We can minimise it, but it is unavoidable unless we're going to stay like this, locked down forever. So rules will change over time. But what I don't want to do, Paul, I do not want to be signalling to people, well, don't bother being part of the 80%. There's no urgency. You'll only be locked out of the pub for a few weeks. No, that's not the position. That is not the position at all. We have made no decision on how long the vaccinated economy will operate for. I'm not about giving people reasons to delay. I'm about trying to have, truthfully, factually, logically, a sense of urgency. Like, go and get vaccinated right now. There's plenty of supply. Those issues are now, they're storied. There's been lots of history, but we're getting into a much better place now. So please go and get the first dose, then get your second dose, be part of the 70%, be part of the 80%, and then we can be free and open. And I'm not ruling it out, but I'm also not signalling that people can wait another month, because I don't know that that's accurate. No decisions have been made.
Premier, there's been a protest today in Edinburgh Gardens, people claiming to be healthcare workers against mandatory vaccine jabs. What's your take on that?
I'm not aware of that.
Last year's heroes, this year's unemployed.
I'm not aware of that, and I'm not going to comment on those matters. I'm not briefed on what that's about. All I can say is from my experience, and I've been honoured in my professional life as in many of the roles I've played, I've met literally thousands, not hundreds, thousands of people who work in our health system. They're all vaccinated for the flu every year, and they're getting vaccinated to treat patients, and they're being right now. They're getting vaccinated to keep their loved ones safe. They're getting vaccinated so they don't contribute to cases. And I make no apology for what the community expects, and that is that people who are caring for vulnerable people in a healthcare setting are vaccinated. And I think that the numbers would tell you a different story to the one you're being told down there. That's not the experience I've had. What was it? Only Professor Warrell was here the other day, the head of ICU at the Austin, and he was asked to describe COVID. And he said it was like drowning on dry land. No one wants to get this. No one wants to finish up in hospital. Therefore, go and book one of those appointments. They're available today. Get vaccinated and help us get free. Thank you all very much. Very good. You can come along tomorrow.
Thank you, Andy.